Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features Uncanny X-Men number 354, cover dated April 1998. Now, as you can see here, there were two covers for this particular issue. I don't know what the reasoning behind that was. Certainly there is an event in this issue which concerns Jean Grey and her garbing up once again in the Phoenix costume, and what that might portend in terms of a future storyline. And we can see that here in on the cover on the right hand side of your screen. So both covers are by Chris Bachalo, inked by Tim Townsend and colored by Steve Buccellato. This is the one that I prefer because it's so very designy, as you can see, and the white background is always a device that, as far as I'm concerned, works in order to make a comic book stand out on the shelves. This one on the left here is an altogether busier picture, but it concerns what most of the issue is about, which is Sauron versus the X-Men once again for the umpteenth time. And on the cover we have Sauron there with Wolverine in costume tearing away at him from behind, and Jubilee here in the foreground in peril. So let's put this cover to one side, get this one centered here on screen, and open it up for the 22 pages of story and art that are inside. So the story picks up from the cliffhanger at the end of the previous issue. Title of this particular chapter is Prehistory, and the creative team is down here. Stephen T. Seagle and Chris Bachalo, storytellers. So Seagle, writer, and Bachalo, penciler. Tim Townsend on inks. Richard Starking's digital comic craft on digital lettering, and colors by Steve Buccellato, digital colors. So Rogue is running away. She's been accused by Storm, as she sees it, of having done something to Wolverine, and she's there yelling out in the woods as she runs back to the mansion. Why? And then this is a device of Stephen T. Seagle's. He's been doing it in every issue he's scripted from 350 onwards, where there will be a theme running throughout that gets developed in the narrative captions. And in this particular issue, the theme is the question of why, or reasons. It's a deceptively simple question, why, but it's also the root of the most profound queries ever raised, and so on and so forth. But then we're back into the story with Sauron. Interesting use of screen tone there for the shade on one side of his figure. He's also asking why, and then he's going to give an explanation. I like that drawing of Rogue running through the woods, and we've got the caked kind of mud there on the path. Interesting little detail. Turn the page. Pretty decent double page spread here of Sauron grabbing Maggot and flying up into the air with him and declaring Sauron has returned. And the life essence I drained from your fallen savage is potent. Never have I felt so alive, he boasts. So Iceman is down on the ground, and he's saying, yeah, that's funny because never have you been so close to dead, courtesy of the X-Men. And Iceman should be an X-Man that Sauron fears, because one of Sauron's greatest weaknesses is cold, and of course Iceman can supply that in spades, so to speak. And we've got captions here with the names of all the different characters for any new readers. And indeed, you know, a thought I had as I was reading through this and preparing for the video review is if a person is a long-time reader, such as me, this just isn't terribly interesting in terms of the basic story here. Sauron versus the X-Men, once again, like I said a few minutes ago, for the umpteenth time. There's absolutely nothing new occurs here, and it really does seem like retreading kind of classic story points. For what? For nostalgia on the one hand. It doesn't work as nostalgia, not for me. So is it simply an acknowledgement that there are new readers always and that they're not going to be familiar with Sauron as a character and he's going to be entirely new for them? Perhaps. But the risk with that is that something like this can be a jumping off point for older readers. So Cannonball smashes into Sauron here, which makes Sauron release Maggot. He falls to the ground. And now the X-Men put together what they know very well. Hey, Storm, Sauron's a reptile, says Iceman. No way is he ready for a New York winter. Your heat bubble over the school grounds is probably what drew him here. So let's hit him with an unexpected cold front. Agreed, says Storm. Now, she is mistress of the elements. And that should be the end of it for Sauron. It should be over on the next page. But of course it isn't. Also confusing here is the layout. I pointed this out in relation to the previous issue, 353. Some of Bachalo's layouts are confusing because here we can see Storm over there on the grass, but here she is again in the foreground. But it's just it looks like it's all within the one panel, but it's not. This is supposed to be a little inset panel here, but it just doesn't work visually. So that's a criticism I have of Bachalo. Sometimes his layouts don't work in respect of legible storytelling. So here is Sauron up above the pine trees. I like that. I think that that's a nice panel there. And he is discoursing in Silver Age villain style. I was not drawn here by the warmth of mere air currents, he declares. I was lured to this location by the hunger within me. I could smell your mutant energies wafting over the stench of that foul city like the scent of a favourite meal. Every Silver Age villain loves the thesaurus. They love adjectives and they love hyperbole. Any case, he drops Sam here onto the electrical wires. That's a pretty nice little sequence there as he gets electrocuted. He'll be fine. Iceman tells him to blast himself free because when he's blasting, he's invulnerable. So he does so. And then we have Iceman versus Sauron. Again, this should be the end of it. Iceman has the exact mutant power to freeze Sauron in place and deal with him. And it should be over on the next page. But of course, it won't be. Let's turn the page. Why is he only sending icicles at him? And again, this has me being critical of Stephen T. Seagle because Scott Lobdell had done a lot of work on Iceman as a character over the course of his run, and Iceman should be well capable of doing much, much more than sending a bunch of icicles at Sauron. He should be able to freeze the air around him and freeze him in place. And he asks a question here Iceman says, when I get done with you, you won't be asking me why, you'll be asking yourself why you ever came here. See what I mean about the theme of whys and wherefores running throughout the issue. So we get an explanation of how is it that Sauron is back? How did he get from the Savage Land to New York? And it has to do with Khazar, Shanna and Zabu. They make their way to New York, and it has something to do with Khazar's solo series from this particular era. And Karl Lykos there gets wind of the fact that there are, or rather he hears rumors, local stories, that the Savage Land was doomed and would soon be destroyed by the gods. So he puts himself in a crate en route to New York. He gets out in New York and he powers himself up with the mutant life force of some random guy, Ellison Payton, whose mutant power was a precognitive knowledge of numbers, blah-de-blah-de-blah. And then we're caught up with the previous issue where he stole energy from Wolverine and was interrupted by Rogue, an unexpected intruder who forced him to conceal himself until he was fully Sauron once more. So just because he was that bit weak, traveling through New York in the wintertime, there's that bird device. So Bachalo in the previous issue had blackbirds, maybe ravens, maybe crows flying, and there it is flying in the background, whatever the significance is. And we still need to know what happened here. Did Rogue do anything untoward in relation to Wolverine? And we'll find out by the end of the issue. So then back to Iceman chasing after Sauron. Storm catches up. Why wasn't she flying in tandem with Iceman the whole time? But of course the plot required that they don't catch him and deal with him so easily. She tells him, you've made a mistake coming to our domain where we are dominant. You are an anachronism in this world. And what does Sauron do then? He pulls a handgun and shoots at Storm. And it looks like he catches her in the chest maybe. So she falls to the ground. Jubilee there sees it and is upset. And then Maggot knocks the handgun out of Sauron's hand. And he sets his slugs to devour the handgun, which they do. And then we're back with Sauron using his hypnotic power to convince Iceman that Jubilee is a huge ogre there, wearing a bikini. That's kind of hilarious. And so he attacks her with his ice powers and encases her in ice, which is exactly what he should have done to Sauron from second number 1 of confrontation. That's what he should have done. So Sauron here, he's still free. He's there saying, yes, Iceman, freeze yourself in place. Make it all the easier for me to descend upon you at my leisure. So Maggot is there. He attacks Sauron from behind. That's a pretty good anchor image there. And something that hasn't been explained for readers, but readers who are paying attention see that sometimes Maggot has a blue skin appearance. And he seems to bulk up as well when he has that blue skin appearance. So what does any of that mean? What's the significance of it? Well, we don't know. And it's a little mystery at the moment. So Sauron starts climbing and he asks Maggot, can you withstand the sudden change in pressure, the dizzying heights, the thinning air? And then back to Stephen T. Seagal's device, why the air grows thinner away from the Earth's crust is no mystery. And this is actually a transition to outer space. And the rocket ship that is being piloted by Deathbird, and aboard which is Bishop, and he is recovering from the explosion in Uncanny X-Men 345 that wrecked the ship that he and the X-Men were traveling back to Earth through a Stargate, and it all went wrong. And Deathbird has taken a romantic shine to Bishop, and she asks him there, were you truly as impressed by the woman I can be as the warrior I am, Bishop? And he replies, he's got a speech back now, he didn't in the previous issue. I'm a man, he says, so I couldn't help but notice your beauty. He's a real silver-tongued romancer, is Bishop. And then he says, but I'm also from a future where it takes more than mere bravery for one to be regarded as a warrior. Your history spoke volumes to me. And he was reading about her in issue 345, but she didn't like that because of the bad things that were said about her in Shi'ar history. Bishop then says, I've also been thinking about other things since the day our ship exploded, leaving me in my present condition. Yes, she asks, and he says, if you were able to teleport us, why couldn't you also save the other X-Men? And if I was completely paralyzed in an explosion, how can you say I'm recovering? Why? And then he's going to be interrupted. But I want to make a note here that the artwork on this particular page by Chris Bachalo is very, very reminiscent of Madureira. So you can see it there, the profile of Bishop's head, even the drawing of Deathbird there, and also this kind of three-quarter profile upshot on Bishop and the way that the underside of the nose is drawn. It all is very reminiscent of Madureira, and I wonder, is it in part Bachalo imitating up to a point Madureira's style, and then Tim Townsend, Madureira's inker formerly on the X-Men, bringing that Madureira flavor to those pencils. So then one more page of this, Deathbird, she gathers her cloak about her. She's offended. She says, you would dare ask me these questions. I saved you from the dark fate that befell your fellow teammates. I saved your life. I risked my life for you, for us. So ask me nothing more. You are paralyzed and only I can save you. I will save you and then we will rule an empire together. Do you understand, my only love? And he says, yes, I understand. But in his private thoughts, he thinks, I understand you're insane and you aren't telling the truth about all this. I don't remember what happened after that explosion, but I do know. I feel the X-Men did not die, and I also know that while I may not be able to move from this sick bed, it's not because I'm paralyzed, imprisoned perhaps, but not paralyzed. So in my review of the previous issue, there was a page concerning Deathbird and Bishop, and I was wondering at the time, was there an allusion to Stephen King's Misery? And I have that thought even more so now. For this particular two-pager, it is as if Deathbird is keeping the object of her romantic obsession imprisoned and seemingly still recovering from his wounds. But there's some trickery going on Deathbird's side in relation to keeping Bishop paralyzed. So the alarm goes off. There's an attack by some strange ship. And it looks like their little rocket ship is suffering systems failure. So that's a cliffhanger now until the next issue. We'll learn what becomes of them. And then we're back in Westchester, New York, and Professor X's X mansion, and Rogue is making her way in, and she's thinking to herself, I gotta get out of here. Nobody believes me anymore, not even Storm. No one seems to care that much. That I lost the man of my dreams and my heart's broken. Well, anyone who read issue 350 of Uncanny X-Men will remember at the end that Rogue left Gambit there, even as he pleaded with her to take him from Antarctica before he would freeze to death. And so this is fairly bizarre thinking on her part when she made the decision to leave him there. And then she thinks, I'm a hero, so I should just be able to take it, set my feelings aside. And so she's completely going into emo, poor me kind of mode. And then she sees Joseph in the television room, and he's unconscious and he's not breathing. So Rogue is there thinking to herself, I gotta get some help, but who? Beast's gone, everyone else is down at the pond, so then she starts calling out for Cecilia Reyes. She can hardly remember her name. This is a well-drawn page, though. Let's turn the page. What will she do? Cecilia is down at the lake as well, I think. Or maybe she went into town with Iceman. No, she can't have gone in with Iceman. I can't remember. Any case, Rogue is there, and she's thinking, okay, Joe, you got to help me out here. I could fly you, but you ain't supposed to move injured folks. I could go get you help, but you might die or get brain damage. If you need mouth-to-mouth right away, or I could give you mouth-to-mouth if... And then she's, of course, cognizant of how her powers work, but she gives him mouth-to-mouth, chest compression, CPR, and she's saying here to him, sorry if I hurt you, Joe. She's never called him Joe before, always called him Joseph when Lobdell was scripting things. But anyway, I ain't never allowed to use my powers, so I don't know how to control them. Never been able to learn how to just do a little bit, but I'm trying. So we know all of this, but in any case, it seems that she is, having had that night with Gambit, that maybe she is, through the physical contact, now finally learning some degree of control over the way her mutant power works, that she can resist the absorption of the memories and powers of others. And then who happens in on the scene except for Marrow? And she says, you don't have to make up excuses for me. I saw what you were doing. You and me are two of a kind at heart. I just snuck back in to take care of some private business, and now I'm going again. Your secret's safe with me for now. So what was that private business? Well, we don't learn in this issue. And then Joseph is conscious again. Though she is a hero, Rogue fears that what Marrow said might be considered true, or worse, might be true. Why? That's a question for later. For now, there's only time for flight. So We're there with Maggot still on Sauron's back. Sauron tosses him off towards the ground. Maggot tells his girls, the slugs there, to eat as much ground as possible, I guess, so that his landing will be a soft one. Let's turn the page. So here he is falling down. Sauron lands on the ground, and then he makes to attack Jubilee while she's still encased in ice. And she uses her power there to smash free of the ice. Why didn't she do that before is an open question. Sauron here, why doesn't he use his hypnotic power on her? Well, he doesn't. Maybe it's because he's overconfident. So Jubilee leaps up onto a tree, and then from the tree down onto his back. But he knocks her off with his wings, and now we get a top-down perspective, and it looks like Sauron has everyone beaten. So Logan is still out for the count. Jubilee's down. Maggot's there in the hole. Iceman, Cannonball. Where though is Storm? Let's turn the page. And then we get an interlude, or a cutaway to Alaska, where Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, is recovering from the nanotech bomb that was implanted in his stomach and removed by emergency surgery by Cecilia Reyes. But he's still in pain, and he hasn't fully gained fine control over his optic blast. So he's practicing here with these tacos in the living room, and then his wife arrives in from the hallway, and she says that it's more like he's making a mess in the room. Can I join you, she asks, or do you want to be alone to settle your vendetta with Taco Bell? So he says, no, come in, bring some salsa and we can have lunch. And then she says, talk to me, oh Sarah, husband of mine, what's going on in that head of yours? And he says, I'm trying to get my powers back in line. He's in pain, he can't focus. And then she says to him, you are more than your powers, Scott Summers. We all are. They may be a part of us, but they are not the totality of what we are. In fact, and then he turns around, he takes a look at her because she's been in silhouette the whole time. And there she is once again in the Phoenix costume that she first wore in Uncanny X-Men 101, and which was the, what shall I say, the external sign of her bonding with the Phoenix Force. So why has she put this costume, this old costume, Dave Cockrum design costume, on once again? What does it portend? What does it mean? Well, we don't know. So let's get back to Westchester. Sauron here looming over Jubilee. He's looking to feast on her mutant life energy. We can see everybody's still out there, but it looks like Wolverine's waking up. I like this sequence. I like the inset small panels where he's popping first one bone claw, then two, then three, and here we get this big anchor image of him facing off ferociously against Sauron, saying that Cannonball is off limits. As for the Beastman, he may be drained, but he ain't dead. And with Wolverine, that's what it takes to get me off your back once I'm on it. So again, what I was saying earlier about Bachalo imitating somewhat Madureira's style, you can see that here in this anchor image of Wolverine, most particularly the way the mouth is drawn there and the nose. It's very Madureira-like. So this is another interestingly laid out page. We've got this kind of diagonal sequence of Wolverine versus Sauron, and then this sequence of 4 panels here where Sauron gets Wolverine down, but Wolverine is getting back up to take him on once again. So it's a nice page. And the snow is falling as well, which should be weakening Sauron. That should be remembered. And then he's attacked by Jubilee. She's back on her feet again. And that seems to do it. He's out. Sauron's... Okay, so Storm recovered because Sauron's shot was mercifully little more than a grey. She'll be fine. And Iceman asks, what are they going to do with him? And Wolverine says, well, since we can't just make Kentucky Fried Pterodactyl out of him, guess I'll tie him up, take him directly into the city, and leave him for S.H.I.E.L.D. or somebody else to sort out. For now, though, I want to find Rogue. Got a couple of questions for her, big ones. So why does he have questions for her? Why are they big questions? Didn't she just stumble upon Sauron, interrupt Sauron's absorption of Wolverine's life force energy? Why, asks the narrative caption, Rogue has called a taxi to the city. She wants to go to Manhattan. The friendly taxi driver there is saying to her, some days are tough. Stuff that usually seems simple seems impossible all of a sudden. It's going to be a long trip. You want to talk about it? I don't mind that, playing the bartender and all. Talk about it. She can't, she says, as a tear falls from her eye, because she did put her hands on Wolverine and did absorb something from him. And that was something, there was a premonition of it in her nightmare from the beginning of the previous issue. And she had this temptation. She had a fascination from the dream and a temptation. And there's that bird flying again in the background, that black bird. So there's definitely something in the script about this. So what is going on? Why is Rogue so all over the place? Anyway, they're driving through Salem Center en route to Manhattan. The taxi driver says, okay, no problem. But you never told me where in Manhattan. So it's the Agi Institute. It's somewhere near Central Park. She saw it on the news, and that was in the previous issue. And the person interviewed in the previous issue was talking about genetic manipulation, and maybe, she's of the idea that maybe she can get some help with her mutant power. So there you go. That's that. Sauron dealt with. He should have been dealt with in about 2 panels by Iceman and Storm, but of course we couldn't have that. The story be over too quickly. A page of letters here. There is something interesting about Rogue abandoning Gambit. Uncanny X-Men 353. Oh yeah. And this month's issue 2. Let's see. Okay, we understand you're upset with the way Rogue treated Gambit, but as you may already be finding out in last month's issue and this month's, is that part of the reason Rogue abandoned Gambit is because she had absorbed some of his personality. So in a way, Gambit punished himself in the end. Okay, so that's interesting. So the reason then that Rogue is acting out of character, she spent a whole night physically with Gambit in the Antarctic, and that has changed her personality. But it should be more obvious in the story itself than it being revealed in answer to a letter correspondent, a letter writer. There you go. I do hope that you enjoyed my review and commentary on Uncanny X-Men 354 with these 2 covers. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments section. If you enjoyed my review and commentary, please like and share the video. It really does help the channel. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned for more content like this.